Jope Maseko's bravery knew no bounds. While imprisoned after the fall of Tobruk in 1942, the member of South Africa's Native Military Corps and his fellow black comrades received inhumane treatment. Still, determined to help the Allies fight against the Axis powers, Maseko took matters into his own hands and made a bomb out of a milk tin and other objects he could find. Then, after asking his friends to look out for him, Maseko boarded a German freight ship and placed the handmade item near the fuel barrels, lit the fuse, and walked back to his work spot before anyone could spot him. Little did the South African soldier know what the ship carried and the role this brave act would have in the war. Taking Tobruk. The port of Tobruk, located in eastern Libya near the Egyptian border, was the nation's only natural harbor, and as such, it was coveted by many. In the early 1910s, Tobruk was occupied by the Italians and was subsequently used as a naval and air base for southern military operations. Because of its strategic location, the port of Tobruk became the most valuable deep-water port in North Africa during World War II. It soon became the focus of some of the most prolonged fighting in the North African theater of the war, and changed hands several times between the Axis and the Allies. After capturing the port from the Italians in early 1941 and taking 25,000 prisoners in the process, the British fortified the valuable area with 12,000 British and Indian troops and 14,000 Australian troops. Subsequently, for 241 days, starting in April, the Axis forces carried out the siege of Tobruk, surrounding the port and besieging the troops, most of whom were Australians, who would become an emblem of fierce resistance against the German-Italian military troops in the North African campaign. Still, after the port was relieved in December, the British top brass decided not to defend the coastal port city a second time, and instead left a small temporary force to hold the port while launching a new strike force closer to the Egyptian border. As a result, all the minefields installed in the area were stripped, dismantled, and sent to the Gazala line further west. By mid-1942, the garrison defending Tobruk and its surroundings was made up of mostly young and inexperienced South African troops. And on June 15th, Hendrik Klapper, a major general of only 1 month standing, took command of Tobruk. Meanwhile, most of the armor and artillery had been taken away to the Egyptian border, so the port's defenses were in poor shape. Still, the western and southern sides of the port were well defended by the South Africans, but the eastern side proved to be its weaker point. The Axis defending the area included the feared Afrika Korps, which was the German expeditionary force in Africa during the North African campaign, led by infamous General-Lieutenant Erwin Rommel. The commander's plan to capture the port of Tobruk once and for all included an ingenious ruse in which his infantry would approach the western port's perimeter while his mobile forces would sweep past them, giving the South African forces the impression that the Axis armor was heading straight into the well-defended Egyptian border. The scheme also involved fake radio messages to convince Allied communications that they were heading somewhere else. Surrender. The operation was carried out on June 20th, as Rommel swung his mobile armored forces back around, heading towards the port's weak eastern perimeter. As the noise from the tanks, trucks, and infantrymen grew louder, the inexperienced South Africans spotted several German Stukas and Ju-88 aircraft flying overhead. Meanwhile, Rommel pressed every available Axis aircraft to head to North Africa and into Tobruk to complete his plan. At 5:20 a.m., Rommel ordered an attack on Tobruk, and the Panzerarmee Afrika attacked the port with heavy artillery and massive air support. The force managed to penetrate a 600-yard-wide gap on the eastern defensive perimeter, allowing German and Italian sappers to race forward, lift the remaining mines, and bridge the tank traps, with tanks and infantry racing through the gaps. Rommel's plan was so effective and swift that many of the Allied forces in the western perimeter had no time to get involved in the fighting. With his headquarters bombed, communications lines wrecked, and a destroyed codebook, An astonished General Klopper lost the last bit of power he had on the situation. With no other choice, Klopper then surrendered himself and his almost 33,000 men to Rommel. By the evening, Tobruk had fallen. The surrender at Tobruk became the second largest capitulation by the British Army in the war, and the single largest capitulation of South African forces in the country's history, both before and after World War II. Tobruk's loss in the North African theater proved a severe blow to the Allies, but mostly the British leadership, which precipitated a heated political crisis back home. Unexpectedly, this major defeat evoked additional sympathy from the United States to the British, leading to an expedited export of supplies and equipment to the Middle East. Native Military Corps. The Axis that now controlled the area took thousands of General Klopper's men as prisoners of war, including 1,200 members of the Native Military Corps, or NMC, a military unit consisting of black South African volunteers recruited into the Union Defense Force. Despite accounting for nearly 40% of the South African fighting force in the war, with over 128,000 volunteers, the men were never given a combative role, and instead served as laborers attached to a limited number of white military units. Throughout the conflict, the men from the Native Military Corps worked in a vast range of roles, from drivers, military cooks and engineers, to stretcher bearers and bomb loaders. At the time, South African race laws prohibited black men from carrying firearms, and the soldiers from the NMC were only issued a single spear as a weapon for guard and ceremonial duty. As such, the men often found themselves in highly dangerous circumstances. One of these men was Job Maseko, a former delivery man that worked as a stretcher bearer, rescuing wounded men during the fight for the port of Tobruk. As the situation escalated in the combat zone on June 20th, all previously established rules and restrictions went out the window, and Maseko and his comrades were given actual rifles to fight on the front lines, like every other soldier. Still, after Tobruk fell, Maseko was captured, and he and the other prisoners were forced to march across the Libyan desert towards an Italian prisoner of war camp. The treatment the prisoners received was nothing short of sinister, and an even worse fate awaited the captured black members of the South African Native Military Corps, as the Axis did not view them as regular troops, much less worthy humans. According to reports in journals from Indian soldiers who were also captured after the fall of Tobruk, both they and the black prisoners received only one packet of biscuits per day and minimal water rations. Other first-hand accounts tell how colored soldiers were commonly attacked by drunk German guards while marching to the camp. What's worse, neither the Indian nor black prisoners were allowed to take cover whenever the Allied bombers attacked the port, eventually becoming victims of their own fight. Most of the black captured soldiers were put to work in the harbor, offloading ships in the blistering sun for hours at a time with no rest. Desperate for food, occurrences of black men escaping from the camp to find something to eat with their white South African counterparts were common. Job Maseko was one of them, but the soldier would take it one step further than anyone else. A bomb made out of a tin can. The unethical treatment of the Axis towards the black prisoners and his duty to assist his own kind convinced Job Maseko to take action against his captors. Thus, the former miner and chemical explosive connoisseur gathered gunpowder from lost bullets and created a bomb out of a single condensed milk tin, a long fuse, and other materials he found lying around the prison camp and the port. A month and a day after the fall of Tobruk, on July 21, 1942, while doing his mundane prisoner duties on the dock, Maseko asked 3 of his comrades to cover for him and distract the guards, while he snuck deep into a German freight ship docked at the harbor. If caught, the soldier would face terrible consequences. Once inside, Maseko carefully placed the bomb near the fuel barrels for maximum effect, then lit a fuse and made his way back to his friends. After waiting for a while, a huge internal explosion shocked everyone on the harbor, and the German freight ship sank almost immediately, causing a commotion in all of Tobruk. Around the same time, Maseko fixed an old German radio that informed him about General Bernard Montgomery's upcoming epic battle at El Alamein in Egypt. Days later, Maseko and other prisoners managed to escape from the prison camp, and walked for 3 weeks through the Libyan desert and enemy lines to join the battle and help turn the tides of the war. The German ship that Maseko single-handedly sank was filled with essential equipment to be used against the Allies in the Battle of El Alamein, and the event ultimately played a defining factor in the Allied victory in late 1942. By November, after the legendary offensive, the British had finally recaptured the port of Tobruk and would hold it as their own for the remainder of the war. Life after the war. During an interview after the recapture of the port of Tobruk, Job Maseko was able to point out the exact spot where the ship was berthed, and a team of divers later found it on the seabed. For his actions, the brave soldier was recommended for a Victoria Cross, the British Commonwealth equivalent to a Medal of Honor. However, according to Neville Lewis, the first official war artist for South Africa during World War II, Maseko was not genuinely seen as a South African citizen because of the color of his skin, and the petition was denied. Maseko was later presented with the military medal by Major General F.H. Theron. As all South African soldiers returned home, most were met with praise and applause from the government and received monthly checks for their service. However, with the apartheid racial segregation laws put in place in the late 1940s, the Black Native Corps only received a bicycle and a pair of boots, while the white South Africans were given houses and land. Soon, Job Maseko's legacy slipped away from memory, and the national hero tragically passed away in 1952 after being struck by a train, and with no money to even pay for his funeral service. Then, in April of 2021, Bill Gillespie, a history aficionado and son of a World War II veteran, started a campaign to award the South African hero with a posthumous Victoria Cross, claiming that, quote, the military medal was just a consolation prize. The campaign is currently backed up by Maseko's family, who firmly believe the hero deserves the medal for his actions and courage that ultimately put South Africa's military prowess on the map. The South African Navy also honored Maseko's legacy with the SAS Job Maseko, naming a missile attack craft after one of the bravest South Africans in history. Thank you for watching our Dark Docs video. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon to be the first to know about our newest content. And for more exciting historical anecdotes, please subscribe to this and all the channels from our Dark Documentaries family. Stay tuned.